Welcome everyone. So in this video, we'll be having a look at Substance Designer and look at it from a real-time effects point of view. So you might have seen materials that have been created with Substance Designer before, but it's also really handy for real-time effects purposes.
Since it comes with a lot of noises and patterns, which allows you to very quickly create your own like complex patterns and noises for real-time effects usage. And since it's all procedural, it will allow you to very quickly iterate upon if you so desire. So if we open a new substance like this, you will be greeted with this screen right here. And this basically means that you can choose one of these templates right here. But most of the time, it's just the best to go with an empty one. And you can pretty much leave it as is. And what this means is that like the size mode will say that in the relative to parent mode, the node at the beginning of the chain will determine what the rest of the resolution will be in the rest of the chain. But I'll show this a bit later. So this will be your work area where you place everything into. And here is where you will find all of your like adjustment layers and noises and patterns. And what these basically are graphs in and of themselves. And if you place these in, this will basically mean that you instance them into your own graph. So over here you will have your 3D view. This could be, for example, very handy for checking certain shader effects you would like to execute, or just to see if your alpha works really well. And over here you have your 2D view. This will show you the currently highlighted node. And if you would like to see your tiled view, you press spacebar. And if you, for example, want to export this this view out, you can click this here and save it out as a bitmap. The Explorer and the base properties, I will get to those a bit later. So I already placed this down, and like I said before, it's basically like a graph, like this B&W spots right here. This is a graph that I just instance into the working area. And you, for example, open the reference right here. So this will open the reference right here. And as you can see, it's like a graph in and of itself. And this is kind of like how your own functions will work. So what this means is that there are certain parameters that you instance and then expose, like exposed to, and then exposed to be editable. And what it then allows you to do is then just change your scale and all these other parameters, like inside of your own, like inside of your own graphs as well. So if we just close this down. Like what you see here is basically some organizational tools. And this entire row will, like this entire row is for all of the operational nodes. These are basically all of the hard-coded nodes that you will use very regularly throughout like your own graphs. But these cannot be accessed and changed like in the B&W spots that I just showed off. So the parent size, this will determine like what your base size will be, but it's just something we like determined before. It's something you don't really need to change, but what this allows you to do is that, for example, if you have something that's very heavy, you can work on a lower size first, and then once you export everything out, you then crank everything up to like a higher resolution. But for most cases, it's not really that needed. Some handy things you can also keep in mind is, for example, if you want to dock certain nodes, you press D. So this will make things a little bit cleaner. Like the color, like this means that what you see right here is that the orange dots, the combined dot, and the gray dot, and each of them respectively mean that the orange dots only accept color inputs. The combined dots like accept either or a grayscale or a color input, and the gray will only accept the grayscale inputs. So for layout, for example, if you have some jumbled up nodes, you can then press this right here to align them, if you so desire. And then this will lay it out for you very nicely. If you would like to switch inputs, you can press X, so this will switch around the connections. So let's say if you would like to reroute something, you hover over the connection, press Alt, and then it lays down a reroute node for you. And for example, if you have, let's say, let's make this real quick. So you want to basically reroute this entire chain to the other one. You don't really have to like delete all of them and reconnect them again. You can just simply hold Shift, and then it will grab the entire bundle and like plug them onto the other side. So right now, just want to quickly go over some things that I like to use myself quite often, but hopefully you might find this very useful as well. So, for example, you can also, in the case you want to like base your textures of a bitmap, like this, for example. Yeah, just taking this random photo. Like it will automatically make it like a square size for you. But of course, if you now press space, it will tile automatically. So you have this node make a tile. So this basically allows you to like splatter your inputs and then make them tile again. So this could, for example, be very handy for like a basis for your own textures, if you so desire. So some miscellaneous things is this is mainly pertains to like clamping values. So right here you have the quantize. This basically means that you don't only can choose like 6 color values. Like what the histogram scan does is that it takes a portion of your histogram. And that's for example very handy if you want to make a mask to only so that it only affects certain values, or if you want to blend certain things together that only takes into account like a very narrow band of the histogram. This is like a simple bit mask.
So for the Shapemapper, this could be really handy for like creating ornaments or loading screen elements, and yeah, something that for example be used in Spelled or something like that.
So here you can see you can choose the pattern amount, the radius, and how wide the input pattern will be. Let's see, the flood fill. This basically is very handy for like randomizing colors and also like the gradients right here. Like the only thing you need to take into account is that the input needs to be pure black and white, like right here, and needs to have a very clear separation in between your patterns in order for them to be randomized. So what you then do is plug in the flat fill first. And then you have some options here, right here, called the flat fill to gradient. So this can mean that, for example, you want to vary up the slopes of like stones. This could be very handy for that. Here you have like a randomized colors. And this is like a hard-coded one, so not too much difference right here. The edge detect right here is something that could be used, for example, to create cracks with. So you take in your masks, and then you take in the what basically pertains to the search radius. So as you can see, now it will search search the nearest value, and then spreads these color values out like that. So, and then here have the edge detect. So as you can see, this could be, for example, be very handy for cracks and stuff. And what I did here was the bevel. So this was basically just to sort of round them off. And then sort of bring back the randomized value to actually get some like randomized slab height, for example. So the vector warp is basically a flow map deformation. It like both the vector morph grayscale and the vector warp grayscale will essentially be the same. The only thing you need to plug in is like a flow map like this, because like it only distorts into 2 coordinates, and like Z will not be taken into account. So as you can see right here, you can only really change the amount that you want to warp, and that should be about it. So here you have the tile sampler, and what this is like a very powerful node for anything pattern based. As you can see right here, it also has inputs for maps that determine certain values like the scale, the rotation, the vector, the color, and also it allows you to then mask certain patterns out if you so desire. Like as you can see, it has lots of different options for size, for scale, position, for rotation. And right here, the multiplier parameters that you find in each respective section, those will be determined by the input maps right here. So, for example, in the like vector map inputs, I only inputted this into the rotation. So as you can see, without it does this. But if I crank this up to 1, it will all point towards the like values that are being input by the vector map right here. So it's like very good for like sort of patterns like that. So, and you then have the concept of layering. So what this means is that you could see the sculpting or like the creation of your noises as the same process as sculpting does, for example. So you start with the big details and then like gradually build them up. So you get a more complex noise. And it makes it very hard to detect that it's procedurally generated, because it's easy to go very overboard very quickly. And at a certain point, you can tell what what kind of nodes you use, or that it has this very like procedural look. So like carefully building your layers and complexity, but not overdoing it too much, will allow you to create more believable and more complex looking texture that doesn't have that like procedural look to it. So if you go here, is that like in the previous example, I used this quite a bit, but this multi-directional warp tool is very, very, very powerful, and allows you to very quickly create some pretty complex looking like noises right out of the gate. So for example, this is your warp angle, and what it also allows you to do is that you can, for example, say that it only takes the average. So that means that it distorts it in 4 directions, and then takes the how do you call this? Takes the the warp result of every direction and only puts it at a 25% opacity, and then combines it together into this. Or you have the maximum result and the minimum result, which is very good. And the chain, so this means that it will basically behave as the normal warp would. But the other modes is very useful in this situation, or in this node basically. So over here you will see that this is the way to channel pack stuff. So I have all these 3 different noises right here. But the only thing you need to do if you, for example, don't want want an alpha inputted, you simply plug a uniform color into the merge, and this will allow you to see the end result, because otherwise, like what you see here right now is that it will then just output a 100%, like a 0% opacity alpha, and that's something you don't want if you don't want to use an alpha. So just leave it like this. Over here you have the cross section, so this will basically output a sort of a side view of your input. And this could, for example, be like very handy for like creating flares or some flash frames, for example. And here is the only thing I did here is go through all the different types of drawing styles it has. So that's very good for that. The slope blur, what this does is, so it takes an input and then it takes a result, and then it basically blurs the input along the slope map, basically. So what this does is, if you, for example, have this noise and then blur it, then what this does is then it sort of expands the result out based on the blurred input map. So what you can also do is, if you, for example, want to push all of these values together, then you take the inverse, and then what you can do right here is that you then sort of get like this very spiderweb type look. The only thing you need to really take into account right here is that you can simply crank up the samples to 32. The intensity, don't go too overboard with it. Like something else you can do, for example, is to only take the minimum. So it will then, for example, only only show the lower half result and then the upper half result. But since it doesn't really have too much low values, it will just simply all get distorted like this. But the blur is sort of a combination of both the low and the high, like values being blurred. Coloring. So the gradient map is like pretty powerful in terms of what it can do. So if you then open the gradient editor, for example. So if you, for example, want to let's say you like certain colors, or you want to sort of pick random colors from your screen, and you can simply say that you then drag over your screen. As you can see, it will take all, and then it will pick up all the values it comes across, and then puts it inside of a gradient. I was going to say, like, invert your colors, invert your position, or desaturate completely. That's also something you can do. But usually, for example, if in case you would like to like layer your values together, is like simply by building it up by putting in the uniform colors and like blending them together with masks like this. And I think that should be, and yeah, that way it's very easy to like build everything up in terms of complexity, and it's also like very handy with the gradient map as well.
So next up, we will be going over the creation of a lens flare texture and some smoke. It will be a narrated segment, but I will be talking about my thought processes along the way. So let's go. So we're starting off with making the horizontal streak first. And we start off with laying down a shape node and selecting the thorn. And what essentially happens here is that I squash this down. As you can see here, the height, I dial this in manually so it gets uniformly squashed down. So what I wanted to do here is break this up with a little bit of anisotropic noise, so you get a bit of streakiness in the actual horizontal streak, so to speak. Doesn't have to be that sharp, so that's why I also put down the blur node. And I put this all into a motion blur and put it to quite high value. And in case the slider doesn't go up to the level you want to, you can type it in yourself, and that way you can make it a bit higher than the slider allows you to go. So in here I combine them together and set it to screen. And also I adjusted the length of the streak a bit by making it a bit wider. What you could also see in the actual flash itself is a bit of a star pattern going on, and that's what I do here. Playing with the values a bit so it gets more random. Then blend this together in a very subtle fashion with the original shape node. Make sure it's protruding a little bit more. Combine this with the original result. So here I wanted to sort of make the core a bit brighter, but it's a bit too big. So what I do here is lay down a levels node. reduce that area just a little bit. And that is the lens flare done. Put down the output node. And let's go on with the cloud. So start off with the cloud. So what I do here is put down a Perlin noise base and scale it all the way down. Combine this together with another Perlin noise that's even smaller. It's also good to play around with the blend nodes and the disorder of both noises to see if you get a noise that's to your liking. What I do here is then put it into a multidirectional warp node and put it to quite a high value again. And in this case, I distort it with another Perlin noise. So I wanted to get a bit of stringiness in the texture. What I did then is sort of very subtly blend it together with the original Perlin noise. And what I did here was putting it through a non-uniform blur node, so it's a little bit softer. Because in the end, we'll still want to have like a very soft result. Tweaking a little bit to see if it gets something nice looking. Just playing around with the blend modes and strength a little bit to see like what fits best. In this case, I put it through another multidirectional warp node to give it a bit more wispiness. So in this case, I sort of mashed everything a bit together a bit more. So what I did here is simply copied over the entire node network and played around with the settings a bit more to get a variation. In this case, something that's a little bit smaller. Then eventually we merge this together with the RGBA merge node, and then making sure that the alpha is completely set to black. And then also put the output node down for this one. Now we're just making sure that we set the options for the outputs and naming them accordingly, and making sure that over here the export does not include the alpha. bit of organization. And then here we define the export settings. These were the ones I already sort of made. Like the check textures will be the only ones who get exported. The suffix can be defined here. And so that concludes it. Thanks for watching.